how do we retain democracy while transcending it? That's the fundamental problem, rational problem, that faces anyone trying to move into the post-political realm. That's the key question. How do we maintain our political structures and so forth while also changing them, right? And I think the option of returning to the centre, becoming a moderate, does not help this crisis, because it doesn't address the fundamental crises that are driving this thirst for change, right? This call for many commentators to say we need to get back to the centre. This Charles M. Johnston is a great meta-theorist that Sean's been looking at in his course. He calls this the compromise fallacy, and I think it's beautifully described by Johnston, that call to return to mainstream moderate policies is an inadequate solution to this problem of the totalitarian language curve. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put to her, the people who'd voted for her in her representative district, I don't know, I think it's in New York, in the Bronx or somewhere, the Queens or somewhere like that. She asked the people who'd voted for her and for Trump why they did that. All right. So she says, I'm listening. Please tell me why you supported Trump or voted Trump and Democrat. And these are some of the replies she got. She's such a good social media operator. And so she got some very interesting replies. I feel that you both are outsiders compared to the rest of DC and less establishment, less conventional, right? I would have voted for you and Trump, but I'm California. I like your style, though. So she likes the style of Trump and of AOC. I feel like Trump and you are both real. So the current crop of mainstream politicians are not real. AOC and Trump are both real. I recognize people might be taking a different view now, but this is their views during the election. It's real simple. Trump and you care for the working class, right? So there's a view that mainstream conventional politics doesn't care for the working class. I want to change, so I went with Trump and blue for the rest to put up some brakes. So someone's got checks and balances in mind here. Trump is going to get us the money and let men have a voice. So there's obviously a man here, I guess, wanting to get a bigger voice in politics and get money in the process. You're brilliant and got amazing passions. So this person recognizes AOC's passion. Voted Trump, but I like you and Bernie. This is a common response, I think. This phenomena also works with Bernie. I don't trust either party establishment, so they don't trust conventional politics. They want action and progress, not stagnation and excuses. Both of you push boundaries and force growth. So this is so interesting. And what sense does it make that someone would vote for AOC and for Trump, you know? And here's a way of understanding this confusing issue. If we, for example, on the left-hand side here, I'll just go back. On the left-hand side, we've got a developmental lens, if you like. Or I call it the altitudinal lens when we use it more generally, from pre-con to pre-conventional politics, say, to conventional politics to post-conventional politics. And across the right, we've got the standard, across the top, we've got the standard spectrum of political options, alternatives. The left-right spectrum, so center, center-left, left, far left, center, center-right, right, far right. This distinguishes basically between different viewpoints to change, I think. So the more conservative you are, you want to retain the status quo. The more radical you are, more progressive, you want to really address the challenges of society by changing things. Now, this distinction has become much more complex, and it no longer really captures what's going on politically. I think everyone knows this, right? So it can relate to other sub-issues like conservative politics wants smaller government, more progressive politics would like larger government and so forth. I think all of those more fine-grained distinctions still relate back to this issue of change. You know, we want smaller government if we're a conservative so that the government can't change things. We want more government if we're on the progressive side because we want government to regulate and to change things and to have policies in response to some of our challenges like climate change or poverty, whatever it might be. So the conventional politics is, what is regarded as the swamp. We should drain the swamp. Conventional politics is not addressing either the need for change or the need to hold on to our status quo. So it's not stepping up for either left or right. I'm sort of generalizing here, but these are sort of general statements, but they have a truth about them. So we need something different. And I think most people would like a different kind of politics. So if you're on the left, the way the media operates is to say the right is such a bad option that you to come up with something different, you have to go further left. Media and vice versa for conservative politics. You would not step across that line if you're wanting something different. You don't want to look for it in the other camp. You want to look for it in your camp, but further in the direction of more radical form of your own politics. So we get, because the media is not presenting any other options, it's polarizing and forcing apart further and further. And we know there's polarization. And I think the media plays the central role in this process because it's not presenting a centrist policy so much. It's not presenting this vertical lens as saying there's other options here. It's just saying go further in your little family of political options. Just become more radical in those options, right? So you get this polarizing effect that's happening. Now, when this polarization goes into an extreme, it actually slips out of that conventional politics. And I think this is what we see in the Trump era, in the Trump's version of conservative Republican politics. And we get the same thing that's happening in Australia. So you get this, the need for changing the swamp, draining the swamp becomes a process of smashing and corrupting the system. And basically that's what we saw with Elon Trump's foray into trying to cut, waste and fraud and so forth from the federal government, from different government departments, basically just smashing things up. And I think from Trump's view, Trump is a massively corrupting figure who's just getting out of his period as president as much financial reward and status as he possibly can. And I think the Trump coin is a classic example of this, where political favors can be paid directly to him with no intervention, just by investing in this digital coin option that he has. The same thing operates in the left, but I think if democracy is maintained, the left has got more of a chance of a more transformative moving into the post-con because they are looking for change, right? But that's only if democracy is maintained. So the way of telling the difference between pre-con and post-con is that post-con wants to maintain democratic norms in their quest for transformative populism, in their quest for renewal and redesign. But if it doesn't maintain that democratic instinct, it will also go into the pre-con. Now, these two domains of pre-con and post-con both get conflated because they both of them advocate for radical change. Now, this is Wilber's pre-trans fallacy, right? That these extremes on the altitudinal spectrum get confused because they are both not part of the conventional aspect of that convention. And so this is why people who vote for Trump also want to vote for AOC and for Bernie, is because they're confusing these two forms of radical change. And I think this, if we join together these lenses in this way and look at some of the dynamics, we start to untangle some of these confusions. Now, the work of Jean-Pierre Faye fits perfectly into this understanding of the pre-trans fallacy as it operates politically within this framework. So what he calls the totalitarian language curve, or horseshoe theory, this means that far left or far right ideologies are not binary opposites, but rather they curve towards each other in their extremes. So he was talking here when the left doesn't become transformational into post-convention, but gets rid of democracy altogether. There's a revolution, not an evolution, but a revolution that denies the integration of former stages and moves into that pre-conventional realm. And when the left does that, it typically becomes a radical form of communism. When the right does it, it becomes a radical form of fascism. And what's interesting about Faye is that he sees this drift and this evolution from mainstream into these totalitarian forms as largely mediated by language. And we looked at this in the first season. We looked at the mediation lens of Vygotsky and how that explains development from an external, social, and cultural perspective, right? So for Vygotsky, the mediation lens is that consciousness is first exterior and social, and only secondarily is it internal and psychological. So all our language is not just a sign of some interior state. Language is the social world being internalized into individuals, creating consciousness in us, to state it very bluntly, so that we get these, and this is a very strong theme of development and evolution in Eastern Europe and in Russia and other places. It's called the sociogenetic view of development. So it's saying the origin of development comes from society, and America has its own sociogenetic traditions. People like George Herbert Mead and Josiah Royce, going back to the 19th century, philosophers and social scientists who saw that the I was derivative of social dynamics, which enabled people to internalize that understanding of their own awareness and place in society. So like Goethe said, we become ourselves through others, right? So it's a very socially mediated understanding, and Faye pulls this out in his understanding that these political changes operate through the mediation of language. And so he's very strong on narrative logic, on stories, the idea that political ideas form stories that shape history and culture. And that it's not, although Vygotsky had a very clear understanding of human development and of, advanced capacities, former, prior, and more simple capacities, he saw this functioning not as the unfolding of interior structures like Piaget did, but more from a Vygotskian understanding that these things were mediated by social capacities. Now, of course, both of these lenses are important, but in the integral world, we tend to use the altitudinal scale way, way more than we use the mediational scale. And I'd love to get your views on this, Susan. Um, so I would love to hear from you in your thoughts about this. So we get the horseshoe theory, right? So we get the center being polarized further and further, and it's not simple left-right line, it's curvilinear, right? And so far left and far right start getting closer to each other. You know, the center of conservative liberal democracy and rational discourse descends into an irrational opportunistic discourse where ideologies and these political stories, these narrative logics are manipulated for totalitarian, power-hungry motives. Yeah. And so the status quo of the center offers these radical alternatives, and part of the story of these radical alternatives, when they're totalitarian or when they're autocratic or when they, sort of decay into oligarchy and so forth, those alternatives are, those stories are manipulated and presented as, we've got the solution for you, for all of our problems. Hand over your democratic rights to us. Hand over your democratic norms, your ethical norms of convention. Don't worry about science and climate change and all of that. If you hand over those rights that were safeguarded previously, all of that, those past norms and conventions won't offer the radical alternative solutions that are required to meet the challenges of today, right? And so this sort of dynamic forms a planetary-wide engine of change, and I think money and profit plays an absolutely central role in this corruption of our dreams for change get corrupted into handing over handing over the problems of the swamp. What we see as the problems to these radical sort of autocratic alternatives. So I hope this non-linear effect, the horseshoe effect, what I think it can be made more complex, and that the second lens of the vertical development actually explains. So in horseshoe theory, it doesn't really explain why the two come together. And I think introducing, as I did just now, this notion of, developmental, the altitudinal lens helps to explain what's actually, why we get this curvilinear effect, because you need a second dimension. A line is just one dimension, and any other shape is two dimensions. So that second dimension is this dimension of altitudinal change. And you get two key drivers for this: anger, fear, grievance, distrust, which often drives the politics of grievance, the politics of fear, and that drives one approach to change, or you get hope, trust, moral outrage, enthusiasm, and imagination, which drives an alternative view of change. And that alternative has to meet the problem of how do we retain democracy while transcending it. That's the fundamental problem, rational problem, that faces anyone trying to move into the post-political realm. That's the key question. How do we maintain our political structures and so forth while also changing them, right? And I think the option of returning to the center, becoming a moderate, does not help this crisis, because it doesn't address the fundamental crises that are driving this thirst for change, right? This call for many commentators to say we need to get back to the center. This Charles M. Johnston is a great meta-theorist that Sean's been looking at in his course. He calls this the compromise fallacy, and I think it's beautifully described by Johnston, that call to return to mainstream moderate policies is an inadequate solution to this problem of the totalitarian language curve.